The next scene changes day 2 of the tutorial and second floor of the tower. The orc was waiting for them although they were intimidated by its huge size. It wasn't as hard as it looked as it was slower than the goblins. And now it changes to day 3, third floor. Although the orcs and goblins appeared in groups, they weren't intelligent enough to actually work together. They further says the method of the guide, where he started a fight between them with a single pebble, was a masterpiece. The reason why we level up with ease was also because of the guide who chose the safe path. I think I know why Seoku Hung highly recommend him. Our protagonist attention caught something that is Seonpik. He was writing a diary. All the above statements was written by him in his diary. Our protagonist asks, what are you up to? Seonpik says, I'm writing a diary, and he have been writing that diary ever since he got the invitation. And Seonpik further says, who knows, maybe he'll end up writing a autobiography or something when he become a ranker. Our protagonist says, haha, that might happen. Seonpik tells that if they get through tomorrow, the next up is the test of the 5th floor. And he wants to get a good job. Hearing these conversation, Last asks what job would she get. This man says, I'm curious too. Lady tells him, speak after brush. Our protagonist laughs. Our protagonist with sad face looks at the sky and says 5th floor. I think here this time too the one talking is Seonpik. Like before, the goblins and the orcs will move in groups on the 4th floor as well. The difference is that their strength and agility are slighter better. The methods are not much different from yesterday. Seonpik and their team was fiercely fighting with their enemies, while our protagonist lost in thought. Suddenly something caught his attention and our protagonist looks at the sky and thinks himself dust clouds. This isn't the day where the guardian should be appearing, thought. Our protagonist thinks, holds his sword and thinks, in any case, it's not a good sign. Our protagonist orders to everyone that we have to get out of this place. Wrap it up quickly. Our protagonist starts running and thinks in his head there is something. Habe realized after spending a long time as a guide. The tutorial in reality is not a game. Our protagonist picks his bags while he was occupied. Jaewon got hurt and almost hit by a orc. Seonpik takes lead and kills it. And another member was got hit by a goblin. Our protagonist continues thinking it's not a game. One small mistake can lead to annihilation of the party. And like it always have been bad feeling, while he's picking things from a very thick fog came near to them. In that fog, Guardian and so many other orcs are present. After seeing the Guardian, our protagonist face becomes pale and start running. Our protagonist orders everyone get ready to run. Our protagonist throws a smoke bomb. Because of earlier facing with monsters, party members are hurt badly. Our protagonist says this is the only chance, hurry up and run. Seonpik asks our protagonist where they're running. Our protagonist replies, first follow me, I know a place where we can hide. After following and running a while that reached to a cave safely, Seonpik asks what was it just now. It looks like an enormous orc. Our protagonist explains that it was a 4th level guardian. He don't understand how it appeared, but let's observe the situation first. And further says we have ample food supply, so we should take it slow and wait for rescue. The man calls our protagonist saying Ha Nul isn't waking up. Our protagonist checks her wound and realizes she has been poisoned by goblin poison. Don't worry too much, she'll be fine once we give her some antidote. When our protagonist, looking into the bag, he realized that antidote was missing. He further understand that it happened while they were running towards the cave. He thinks himself, although they were in a rush, for him to make such an amateurish mistake. He said himself that he have to keep calm. He can't be the one being faltered. Our protagonist calls everybody and says he'll going outside and send a rescue signal. Everyone so shocked to hear his words and they suggest him to stay because outside filled with dangers. Our protagonist says don't worry, have gone around the tutorial floors until he got sick of them. And he further says he's just going to the hills and shoot the flare. Our protagonist boosts himself saying he don't look like much, but he's the best level 1 in the world. Our protagonist what he said himself there, but now he's hiding behind the rocks not to found by the orcs, and the moment paths of the monsters were all changed due to the appearance of the guardian. It's hard to predict where they'll be now. Our protagonist sees in front of a orc, so he give up on the route and look for the another route. He thinks in head if anything happens, have got one smoke bomb left as well. Our protagonist walks besides a cliff with his current speed, he'll reach the hill that he aiming for in 3 minutes. He thinks that he quickly shoot the flare and return to the cave. He wishes not to run into Guardian. It's just TGE Guardian. He is walking while thinking, but our protagonist didn't know that the Guardian was already behind him. He suddenly felt the pressure by the time our protagonist realized that Guardian strike our protagonist back, and he thrown away quite far with that blow. He dashes the rocks and vomit the blood. And smoke bomb was used without using it. Our protagonist thinks all of it why it is a Guardian. Our protagonist reach the flare and hold it, after that he shoot into the air. While he was doing it, he thinks that he must get away quickly. He's not someone who falls for the same trick twice. First, he must make as much distance between it and himself. And he have to keep calm because here no one knows the place better than him. He thinks that there's definitely going to be a way out for him from this situation. While he's waking thinking all of these things, he suddenly reached the 5th floor of the test gate. This is the door our protagonist jump into, and giving up on everything. But couldn't do it because of his family. 5th floor is a place where death is the only thing waiting for a level 1 player like him. He was so sad and thinks, why did he come here? A guy who can't even handle the 4th floor, going to the 5th floor, and now have run into a dead end. Certain death and uncertain death, there's still a choice. If he's still remaining here, he'll killed by Guardian Orc. If he enters 5th floor, he don't know what awaits for him there. If he go to 5th floor, there may be a chance to survive. So our protagonist decided to go to 5th floor. He says loud, let's have a look. On what's behind saying it, he opens the door and enters into the 5th floor. Right after he enters the 5th floor, there's a system message. It says you have entered the first test, checking the player's information. That system again says you've met the requirements. System says you have entered the first test room. Confirming player's information. Unconfirmed ability discovered. You have met the conditions. Difficulty significantly lowered. Our protagonist don't know what's going and he's in pain. In front of him a goat appears. System says the first test, hunt the goat. Our protagonist still don't know what's going on and stand on his knees, look at the notification window. He's still confused. That goat stand in front of our protagonist and the system says you have passed the test, job determined. And unconfirmed ability discovered. Our protagonist stand on his foot and kills the goat with his knife. System says rewards will be distributed. Perfect clear. Quality of rewards has been increased. Our protagonist thinks in his head, I came in prepared to die. But it's just a goat. Is this all? While he was thinking, from the back a dark smoke coming towards our protagonist. Our protagonist noticed it right after that it surround him. Our protagonist didn't know what's going on, neither us. There's a voice suddenly talks, what are you? Our protagonist regains consciousness and thinks where he is. That same voice talks again. It's ask our protagonist, are you my master? Our protagonist thinks it's a little boy voice. And looks around, says master. With confusion. That voice again says this idiot who can't even answer a question is my master. Our protagonist becomes annoyed and asks, what are you talking about? That voice answer our protagonist saying, I waited a song long for this day. And it further says, whatever, just choose a name for him. Our protagonist says confusionally, a name. That voice says yes, a name. He's telling our protagonist to link with him. Now system says ego wants to link with you and asks our protagonist does he choose to accept the link request with ego. And system again says please choose a name for ego. Now scene changes to somewhere there Taeshik and our protagonist's sister stands. They noticed our protagonist opening his eyes. They run towards our protagonist calling his name. His sister asks him how he is feeling. They called nurse. Our protagonist says he did already press the bell. It's been 2 weeks that our protagonist found unconscious at the door of the 5th floor. And he was able to hear what happened then, from Taeshik. The players of the guild who saw the flare signal, were able to corner the Guardian, that had been going berserk at the door to the 5th floor. But the Guardian managed to get away. It bothers our protagonist that they weren't able to catch it, but seeing that Seonpil's party was able to rescued, safe in one piece as well, put my heart at ease. Our protagonist got a phone call from his mother. Our protagonist says to his mother after few more tests he's okay to leave the hospital. He further says that he's not a kid, so don't worry about him and relax, the insurance took care of the hospital fees so don't worry at all. Our protagonist says to his sister listen mother's words and our protagonist says to his mother he'll let know when discharge date is finalized. Our protagonist thinks in his head after clearing the 4th floor he's still at level. After saying it holding the mobile a ring slowly appear to his finger, now he go to tower, and the scene now changes to he came to the gate. Again, same as usual, gossiping started. Our protagonist holds his back with hands and walks away. Someone asks, is he really that famous? Some other days, yeah, I'm telling you. This man with blue hair asks what he famous for. A man beside him asks, you don't know rumors about the guy who can't level up. Another man from behind says it's old news. And asks both of them, don't you know he's famous for something else now? They asks what it is now. That person says it's tutorial slaughterer. Now shows our protagonist stands in front of the group of goblins. While raising his hand up, summons his knife and starts slaughtering whole group of monsters with smirk on his face and full of confidence. Now shows where we left last time when voice asks our protagonist to choose a name. Our protagonist says name right. That voice, that's right, choose a name for him. Our protagonist gives him name Lu. That's voice says he likes it and accept the name. Now our protagonist info tab shows name Gigyu Kim, level 1, job, ego's partner, unique ability, link. Lu, level 7 strength 18. Our protagonist thinks it feels just like yesterday, that he was shaking over 1 or 2 orcs. Now it feels like more work for him to collect these crystals. Our protagonist says Lu, it's right what he said. Now scene changes to 1 month back. And shows info tab, name Gigyu Kim, level 1. Job ego's partner. Unique ability link. Our protagonist thinks ego's partner, huh? He thinks it wasn't a dream. The good thing is he decided to come to the tower as soon as he was discharged. Our protagonist's sister gets angry because he almost died in tower and now he wants to go the tower. Our protagonist thinks he'll get scolded by his sister once he get home. And further says he can't just do nothing, when his info tab has changed for the first time in 5 years. Our protagonist thinks how he links with the ego thing, he obtained it newly so he doesn't know how to use it ego power. Our protagonist thinks a while after with a conclusion with different poses and position says link up. Nothing changed, awkward moment. Haha, how shoes untied. Our protagonist holds his head sat behind a tree because of embrace moment a while ago and thinks, he was too excited, thank goodness people don't come here often. How embracing. He further thinks that how did he use that thing. He even gave that a bratty voice a name Lu. Suddenly a red light appears, system appears and says, a formless ego, Lu, has been summoned. Like a ball with red light glowing it appears in front of our protagonist in a bit confusion. System says Lu's appearance has not been formed. Our protagonist was happy now because it's finally working. System says again Lu's appearance will be chosen at random, due to player's lack of ability. Ingredients for Lu's materialization will be automatically observed. Our protagonist don't what's going on and says what ingredients? What observes? And thinks what that's supposed to mean. Suddenly that spherical shape thing observes into it suddenly and it observes our protagonist belonging to our protagonist says the stuff in there worth $5,000 by itself. That thing won't stop there, it tears our protagonist clothes, observe it. It observes everything. Our protagonist holds his inners and says anything but these inners. Our protagonist begs it, and now it stops observing. Our protagonist thinks is it over. Suddenly large amount of light struck that place. Our protagonist can't able to see anything after that. Our protagonist eyes wide open. In front of him a black beautiful sword appears. Our protagonist covers himself with randomly scavenged blanket. With question face our protagonist talks with sword like you're saying you're Lu, right? Lu says geez, how many times are you going to make me repeat myself? Scolding our protagonist saying idiot. Our protagonist gets angry but says in his head that he have to calm down. Our protagonist asks anyway what's an ego? Is that a soul? Lu answers our protagonist saying I'm not a soul. Our protagonist asks then what? Lu says I don't know too idiot, before that stop touching me, you damn pervert. Our protagonist really pissed off because of Lu's behavior but didn't say anything. And further ask Lu that he can move by himself. Lu replies that he can't yet, but probably will be able to move in the future. Our protagonist asks another question about breaking links by himself and switching masters. Lu tells that it's up to the master. The ego has no control over changing masters. Our protagonist says then next question, once you become able to move later, can you harm him? Asked by our protagonist. Lu tells our protagonist attacking him is possible, but if he die, his linked ego will also disappear, so it's highly impractical. Our protagonist oh really? Last question, then. Do you pain feel too? Lu says of course, he's a distinguished ego. That is, he can feel all emotions. And if chosen in the settings, all sensation too, said by Lu. Here shows that our protagonist holding a rock in his hands. Lu asks what is it, system says, will our protagonist turn on Lu's pain perception? Our protagonist says manners makes the man and hit the Lu with that rock. Now scene changes, an orc was sliced by blade, it's our Lu's doing, system says Lu is observing the blood of the orc. Lu has acquired experience points. Lu has leveled up. Lu's stats have increased. Our protagonist was satisfied. Our protagonist says looking back, there was a time when Lu rebelled a lot. Nostalgic huh? Lu says hee what an embarrassing memory, master. When he think back to then, Lu still get chills. Our protagonist with a intimidating look says what? Lu scared and says chill mater. He said he feel blessed to be with such a chill master. Our protagonist says I thought so, our bag almost fill. Let's head back down for tonight. Lu says it feels good going out master. Our protagonist says yay, then next time, instead of the tower, let's try going into a gate. Someone says to our protagonist don't go into any gates for the time being. Our protagonist asks why not. It's Taeshik who's advising to our protagonist, because 4 high rankers have died recently in a gate in the US. And there's been several cases where gates that's supposed to be rank F, were rank circa. Or gates turn out to have weird construction and architectures. Taeshik further says this was never happened before in 23 years, but it started a month ago. Our protagonist thinks in his head a month ago is when he met Lu. Our protagonist thinks no, it's not because of him. Taeshik says I'm not telling you to avoid them forever. He's just saying it's best to stay away from danger. Taeshik further says he know that our protagonist feeling, finally being able to use his unique ability, but just stay put for a little bit. Our protagonist says alright. Thanks for looking out for him. Taeshik replies good work out there. Get home safely now. Tutorial slaughter or teases our protagonist. Our protagonist feels annoyed and says cut it out. High concentration crystals, special items, clear bounties. The gates are much more lucrative than the tower. Said by our protagonist. Our protagonist takes out his mobile phone from his jacket and thinks Taeshik told not to do. But he don't have a choice, with all these loans, not to mention he can barely afford to pay back the interests. And further thinks that the odds of a gate being an abnormal are low. What's the worst that can happen? Our protagonist looking for group to fill up as a member, and after founding it he applied to join the group. And makes a call. Now scene changes to coffee shop. A man introduces to our protagonist. His name is Ha Songsu, he's the party leader. Our protagonist introduced himself as Kim Gigyu, he's the one who called that man. That man asks our protagonist, is this your first time hunting in a gate? Our protagonist says yes, and our protagonist says but I know of the various strategies involved in battle. That man shows the contract to our protagonist. That man further says I am sure you will know by looking at it, but it mentions the splitting of profits, cancellation fees and other details. It means we will roll the device for those who want the loot items. That man says the location is at Guri Station. Our protagonist need to meet them. They're the day after tomorrow at 2 p.m. That man further says this may be obvious but you can't be late. Our protagonist review the contract. And our protagonist thinks there are 2 types of gates. Temporary gates which disappear after being cleared, and permanent gates which don't and allow players to hunt there repeatedly. Permanent gates are not as special and don't give great items like the temporary gates. They are fairly easy to hunt in thanks to the various strategies known now. Someone saying if you are all done checking your equipments, let's start heading in. Our protagonist joins them in the party members in dungeon, goes with them. Our protagonist thinks that everyone's so awkward with one another. Did they all join from the website our protagonist joined from? Some of the questions rises in our protagonist head. Our protagonist thinks those 2 look like they know each other. One of the man glance, he's the captain of the today's hunt. And captain says wait, hold your positions, because he noticed something. Captain says it's coming. All of a sudden so many zombies comes towards them. Those zombies are running towards our protagonist team. Captain orders the tank to deal with them. Captain starts shooting with arrows. This blonde guy rush forward with his shield. Lu says to our protagonist let's kill them all. One of the men strike the zombie with his sword but it won't take much damage. The guy who holding the sword says, why are these rotten shits so tough? Sword holding guy notice someone moving fast. And it's our protagonist slaughtering the zombies with lightning speed. After that, this blonde guy approach our protagonist and says, looking like this is going to be a fast clear thanks to you, Gigyu. The sword man asks our protagonist, didn't you say you're level 7? I feel like I'm getting carried. Our protagonist reply to them with awkward smile, it's just a luck. Blonde hair guy says, you're just being humble. Our protagonist have the largest contribution in taking down the mini boss back there. Blonde guy asks our protagonist let him join our protagonist party after they clear this. Our protagonist laughs awkwardly. Our protagonist thinks in his head, thankfully Captain doesn't seems to care. Acting like this, when another person is the party leader is pretty rude. That guy with blonde hair says again, anyways thanks to you we were able to do something real hunting. The person besides our protagonist also says yes. Protagonist awkwardly says no way. Our protagonist thinks in his head they were not wrong, though. This party leader says let's start moving again everyone. Our protagonist asks his ego partner Lu, are you ready? Lu against killing zombies because zombie blood tastes bad. Our protagonist says to Lu just wait a little longer, they'll be coming to the boss room soon. These two guys looking at our protagonist with something planning their head. This blonde guy says something beside with the guy and they too laughs maliciously. Now scene changes to the very large gate where everyone presents. And this gate is the boss room entrance gate room. Our protest against thinks in his head is this huge iron gate for keeping the boss monster in. Party leader says he will explain attack pattern at the gatekeeper Terran. He further says has a huge body. Somebody interrupts. While he was saying this, blonde guy says, ah man. You think we didn't research all of this, coming into a sustained gate? Let's hurry up and go, we're wasting time. Captain says listen, even if you know. Because a single person's mistake can cause the entire party to be in danger. This guy with blonde hair really annoying says so fucking annoying. This lady gets angry and grin her teeth. Captain notice it and makes her silence with a glance. This lady becomes silent. Captain starts again, I will start explaining again. Our protagonists don't know what's going on and thinks, that was weird, just now. Because our protagonist noticed their interaction with eyes. Captain says once we melt the bars with a corrosive liquid and enter the boss room, we will be faced with Terran sitting on the floor with his back towards us. They think that it's a lot bigger than they expected. They are communicating with silence. Captain says he will start, but damaging it by firing an explosive arrow. Captain says he is starting. Captain fired the arrow towards the Terran, and others take their positions. Captain shoot the arrow towards Terran. Captain thinks after hitting the Terran will start swinging its fists around. As they planned, it's happening now. Terran movements was to be blocked by blonde guy. Terran attacks the group with anger, then the blonde guy block with his shield. Terran was thrown away the blonde guy. The guy with the sword moves forward to attack. In the brief second the dealers will need to damage it as much they can. Protagonist come forward to attack. Others are attacking as might as they can. And the most important moment is when it will crouch and change its attack pattern. Terran starts curling up. In this state Terran defense will increase by 3 times so most attacks won't go through. Now they gave a chance to attack the Terran to our protagonist. Because our protagonist attacks at least damage it a little. And our protagonist charge towards the Terran and jumps into the air and about to strike. The monster and suddenly system says your assimilation rate with Lu has increased. You can now use Ru's power a little more efficiently. Our protagonist surprised to hear the system voice. And right after that our protagonist landed the attack on Terran. Everyone was so surprised because the gatekeeper Terran has been defeated. With that action everyone disbelief. The system says you have gained the skill cannibalism. Cannibalism skill affects or recover health by consuming a corpses. Our protagonist was able to kill the Terran, with single blow. They can't believe what they saw with their eyes. Blonde guy asks our protagonist calling him by his name Gigyu, ask our protagonist to give his contact information. Sword guy too ask our protagonist contact information. Our protagonist says to them they can talk about that later. Captain says listen everyone. An equipment item Drager of paralysis has dropped. Sword guy says not only did they clear it easily but their an equipment item dropped too. Captain says as outlined by the contract. He will now roll the dice to determine reward distribution. Blonde guy calls our protagonist. Our protagonist don't know what he is up to. Blonde guy asks our protagonist, don't you wanna have that dagger? Our protagonist was speechless. Our protagonist thinks in his head. Blonde guy keeps talking down to him. Blonde hair guy further says, if we are being honest, he basically did all the work, didn't he? Sword guy, and he will take care of it, so just play along, ask our protagonist. Blonde hair guy thinks there's no way our protagonist will ignore them after this. He'll scratch his back, you'll scratch mine. Protagonist thinks after being a guide for 5 years he had developed an eye for people. Blonde guy and sword guy glare at each other. According to our protagonist, both of them have low expectations on them, but to think they would try something like this. On the other hand, party leader and the girl whose name our protagonist don't know. Our protagonists have no idea. It does seems like they have something up their sleeve though. Captain says, if you are all ready we will begin. Captain says he will take out the dice now. Sword guy and blonde hair guy glance at each other. And suddenly that make a move. Blonde hair guy with dagger rushed towards the captain. And our protagonist caught the blonde hair guy arm, and after that our protagonist pin him down. Blonde hair guy asks our protagonist he think they both are in the same side. Blonde hair guy thinks in his head, if he move hastily now, he might die. So he decided to ask help from sword guy, ask him to do something. But the sword guy shivers in fear. Our protagonist thinks that was close. He could have died. Not party leader but this blonde hair guy. Our protagonist further thinks he didn't even see her take out her dagger. Isn't she a magician? How dangerous. Party leader no different. He didn't even flinch when a knife was flying at his throat. Rather, he was watching the knife, instead. I thinks it's our protagonist who asked them, who are you guys? Captain replies that they'd to ask him that themselves, actually. Our protagonist was speechless. Our protagonist asks what they want to do with these guys. Sword guy told that. Blonde guy says to sword guy that he'd get paid, as long as he did as he was told. And he further says he didn't know that blonde hair guy was trying to stab Captain. Captain asks our protagonist, why are you asking me that? Our protagonist says, well Captain, you're their target, after all. Captain thinks a while, and calls the lady beside him by her name Harem. And suddenly she emits the black aura. Our protagonist eyes wide open. Within a second she kills, moves forward and knock the sword guy. And also our protagonist knock the blonde hair guy with his hand and thinks it's WRKED. Our protagonist thinks as he expected. She was dangerous. She deals with them in an instant. After that our protagonist says, he'll you taking the dagger? Captain asks, why's that? Our protagonist says he basically saved his life. So our protagonist thinking it should be fine for him to have the dagger. Captain says it's a bit too much. Our protagonist says an item of this caliber isn't much to someone like you, is it? Captain once. Hearing it frozen, silence between them occur a moment. Captain asks, do you know how I am? Our protagonist answers that question like, if he have someone like that as his bodyguard, it means you're no ordinary person. And further says our protagonist that he have no interest neither of them, nor will our protagonist try to find out, or blabber about them. Suddenly our protagonist with funny expression, he'll leave taking care of these two in their hands. Our protagonist further says he gonna hunt for a little longer before he head back. Lou says to our protagonist that the girl called Harem is dangerous. Our protagonist says to Lou he know, that's why he only talked with them. Further says should have run away or something. Lou says to our protagonist, you know they're dangerous, yet you leave unconscious people behind with them. And taken their equipment too. Our protagonist says he saved his life after all. And it's thanks to that, now they can stay behind and farm like this. Lou absorbs the zombie's stamina. Our protagonist asks Lou, how do you feel? Do you feel like you have two hearts? Lou says, master, I am an ego. And again zombie blood is no good. Our protagonist says, okay, we'll get out of here. There are no more zombies, and we've absorbed enough blood, anyway. Lou absorbs stats through blood. Dexterity from goblins, strength from orcs, and stamina from zombies. So Lou's stats are higher than what they should be at his level. Our protagonist says let's just drop by rewards room before they leave the gate. Our protagonist enters into the rewards room. A limbo space, only accessible through the gatekeeper's corpse. As its name suggests, it's where the rewards for clearing the gate are given. Our protagonist about to touch the corpse, but something caught our protagonist's attention and calls Lu. Lu asks what is it? Our protagonist asks was there something like this here before? Our protagonist about the wall because it's shining now. Lu says no, there wasn't. Our protagonist says inside something looks hollow. Our protagonist asks Lu what you say breakfast it Lu agree to that. Our protagonist breaks the wall with one hit. When our protagonist was breaking the wall Lu says wait, but our protagonist breaks it because he's already in action. Our protagonist says dust is no joke what do you think Lu? Lu all of a sudden says ego. He sense another ego here. Our protagonist asks Lu in a place like this have another ego. Dust slowly fade away a bright light appears.
If you want to see the further episodes, support and subscribe to our channel.